Number 1. The store. In the late 70s, I recall visiting our grandparents' house. They lived in a holler about a 20-minute drive away from the nearest town. When going to their house, you would turn off a main road onto a rocky road, and I always knew the turn was coming because there was a little mom-and-pop type store on the side of the road. This store was really the sort of thing that you would never see nowadays. It was a very small, old gray building. There was a very old drink cooler sitting on the porch, and it was very small inside. There was a counter, some small coolers, and shelves with some simple groceries on them. It was truly the definition of what a small country store was. By the counter, they had boxes of candy that cost 10 cents, if I remember it correctly. My cousins and I used to always walk down to the store and buy boxes of candy whenever we had a dime or two on us. And that was what was going on this day. I was 10 years old at the time, and my cousin was the same age as me, basically. We decided to walk down the road to the store and get some pop and some candy. Now, it was a little bit of a walk, and it took us a little time to get there, but it wasn't something that we hadn't done before. But this time, something very different happened. A car pulled up the street with an older guy in the driver's seat. He stopped by us and asked us what we were doing. We had never seen the guy before, and we knew a lot of the people in this area. We simply told him that we were going down to the store to get some candy. Well, the guy insisted that we let him drive us to the store. My cousin and I enjoyed the walk, and we knew that we didn't get in the car with people that we didn't know. So we turned him down. But he kept trying to get us to get in the car with him for a while. Finally giving up, the man, who was downright creepy, drove off. Now, the little store didn't really have a parking lot. A couple cars could park out in front of it at any time. When we got close, we saw that the guy from the car was not only parked there, but he was sitting on the porch swing, drinking a tall bottle of mellow yellow. When we got to the store, he tried talking to us again, letting us know that he would be happy to drive us home once we were done in the store. While my cousin and I were extremely uncomfortable, the guy was just so persistent and so creepy that we wouldn't even consider it under any circumstances. But as we walked into the store, the man said, "I'll be waiting for you." We told the shop owner what was going on. I can't recall her name, but she was immediately concerned. She called our parents, and my dad drove down to the store to pick us up. Apparently, when my dad showed up, the man got into his car and left. We found out when we got older that this man was accused several times of doing things to boys that lived in the area. I really believe it based off the way that he was behaving. I don't know what would have happened if we got into that car, but I know it couldn't have been good. Number 2. Stroll. I never really got scared very much, so I would do things that probably might scare other people without really thinking about it. One thing I always did, and even do nowadays, is I like to take walks at nighttime. I am a night person, like I'm sure many people are, and my mind just works better when it's dark outside. I started taking walks in the dark, a lot of times really late at night, when I was really young. This happened when I was 14 years old. Me and my family lived in an old house, way out in the country on a hill. Although the house itself was really nice, it didn't have air conditioning, so in the summertime, all we had to keep ourselves cool were fans and open windows. Today I much prefer cold weather, and I live in a cooler climate because of that. It helps me sleep. Back then and today, if it is too warm, I won't have any chance of getting to sleep. I shared a bedroom with my brother when we lived in this house. We had the windows open, and we had one box fan, so it didn't oscillate. So on this summer night, I was very uncomfortable and couldn't go to sleep. I got up and tried to watch some television. I always liked the shows that came on late at nighttime, such as Freddy's Nightmares or Tales from the Dark Side. But even watching those shows was not enough to make me forget about how hot it was in the house. I checked, and it was much cooler outside than it was in the house, so I decided that I would go out and go for a walk. It had to be around midnight when I went out. Everyone else was in bed, so I didn't tell anyone where I was going. But that wasn't a big deal. There was nothing around our house but hills and trees and gravel roads anyway. I wasn't going to get mugged or anything like that. I was just hoping that a walk in the cooler air would tire me out, and I would be able to sleep a lot easier when I got home. I walked on the side of the gravel road. There wasn't a shoulder per se, but there was some normal ground on both sides of the road. Walking on the gravel, even in shoes, could be very uncomfortable, so I walked on the side and enjoyed it. I went pretty far down the road, but no further than I'd ever gone before. I eventually decided to turn around and head back towards the house when I came to a road that turned off the main road and decided it was a good place to turn around. Right as I turned around, the most interesting thing happened. A small black cat came running down the road that I hadn't turned on and ran right up to me. I always liked cats, although we didn't have one, and I stopped to pet the kitty. Of course, the cat was very receptive to the petting, and I almost didn't want to stop petting, but I knew that I had to get home before I was out there for far too long. But as I began walking away from the cat decided that it wasn't ready to give up on me. Instead, she began trotting along beside me. I thought it was adorable, but I was worried that the cat would get too far from its owner and have a hard time trying to find its way home. However, trying to get the cat to go on its way proved futile. The cat definitely seemed to like me and decided to walk home along with me. I figured there was nothing that I could really do. The cat kept up with me as I walked, its little legs working quickly so it wouldn't fall behind. It was pretty cute. As we know with cats, they can pretty much decide who they want to be with, and I sort of had a feeling that this cat was going to be with me for a while. A while after we walked along, something distracted the cat. She stopped, and because I was paying close attention to her, I stopped and tried to see what was wrong. Something obviously seemed to annoy her, and she even hissed at some unseen thing in the woods. It made me a little nervous, thinking something bad might be out there, but I didn't see or hear anything. After a few moments, I was able to convince the cat to go ahead and start trotting home with me again. She went back to moving her little legs quickly to keep up with me. After that, I began wondering what possibly could have annoyed the kitty so much. I also thought that whatever it was, it must have made my imagination begin to run away with me. I actually began thinking that I was hearing someone or something walking around in the woods to the side of me. The longer I walked, the more I thought that I was hearing things. I did begin to feel a little scared for the first time, but the presence of the cat walking with me made me feel so very much better. The next time that I heard something that definitely sounded like there was something out in the woods following me, the cat noticed again too. Immediately she took a stance very similar to the one she had before. She began growling at something and hissing too. Since she was acting exactly the way that she had been before, I was convinced that whatever she had been hissing at was definitely following us. I didn't know what it could have been, human or creature, but I really just wanted to get home as quickly as possible. I would have picked the cat up and ran with her, but I didn't want to startle or scare her. When she finally decided to begin following me again, I tried to hurry as much as possible without going too fast for her. I could tell she wasn't a full-grown cat yet, and her little legs were getting quite the workout, just trying to keep up with me in the first place. But the cat, who I was already considering my cat now, kept up with me, and never fell behind. The rest of the walk home was nerve-wracking, even though we didn't have another instance of the cat stopping. I kept hearing things out in the woods, but decided that if none of it was bothering her enough to stop, I was probably okay. So I just hurried along, trying my best to ignore everything that I was hearing out in the woods. I was happy when I was almost back to my house. We had a really big yard and driveway though, so even though I was back in the yard, it was still a little bit of a walk in the dark to get to the house. I half expected the cat to leave because she had successfully escorted me home. She didn't though, and followed me right up to the house. I decided I wanted to reward the cat for her escort and what I thought was her protection. I couldn't bring her in the house right away since none of my family knew about her and would be shocked that there was a cat in the house. If they noticed her while I was sleeping, who knew what they would do? But I was sure that she would wait for me as I went into the house. I got a little bit of lunch meat and a bowl of water for the kitty, and then went back outside. The cat was still there, but she was agitated again. She was looking off to the side of the house, toward the fence that separated our yard from the woods. When I looked over there, at first I could not see anything, but as I looked longer, I finally detected some movement out there by the fence. There was someone or something out there, and it was clearly distressing the poor little cat quite a lot. It was when I could see the movement and the figure trying to climb over the fence that I realized that it was a person, and it was a person who wasn't making the cat too happy, so I figured it was someone up to something bad. I had a rifle that I kept in the garage and I ran to get it. I hoped that the guy, whoever he was, would see it and get scared and run off. I didn't want to fire it. By the time I got back with it, the guy was much closer, and I could see him a lot better. He was really ratty looking, almost like he was homeless or something. He saw me with a gun and then paused. It was then that I noticed he had a hunting knife in his hand, and a chill went down my spine. "Get off our property," I warned him. The man took one step toward me, as if he was daring me to fire the gun. I didn't do anything until he stepped again toward me. I fired the gun in his direction, not up in the air, but I didn't aim at him. I deliberately missed him. It was a warning shot, but a warning shot that I hoped he would take very seriously. He did. The guy turned and ran back to the fence. He climbed over it, and he disappeared into the night. The rifle shot, of course, woke my dad and my family up. My dad came out onto the porch, and I had to explain to him what had happened. He took the rifle and told me to take the cat inside the house. He went to check out the sides of the fence to make sure the guy was gone. We couldn't figure out who the guy was or why he was carrying a knife around in the dark like he did. My dad thought that with the cat's reaction that maybe he was a cat abuser. There were some pretty sick people out there who did stuff to cats, and maybe this cat got away from him. Or maybe he wanted to attack me, but the cat kept scaring him off. We don't know. But we didn't think we'd have a problem with him, since we knew we had guns at the house. We adopted the cat and named her Midnight. She was the best pet that I ever had. I kept her indoors, though, just in case that guy ever tried to come back for her. I think she could have taken care of herself, though. Number 3. Roads. Note: the actions of the people in the story should be discouraged. Don't drink and drive. When I first began driving, it was when I was 14 years old. It wasn't strange for people during this time period to drive before they were old enough to get a license. Hell, I'd been chewing tobacco for several years even before that, so we really didn't have a lot of care for waiting until we were old enough to do anything. It just wasn't that big of a deal. I used to work on cars with my dad all the time growing up, so when I was 14, he had gotten an old clunker of a car, and we went about fixing it up for me to drive. Once we got it done, I was allowed to drive it whenever I wanted to in the hollers and hills that we lived in. My dad would even let me drive it into town on occasion, but not too often. The police in town really didn't care that I was underage, but my dad didn't want me to take advantage of that all the time. On this night, though, I went and picked up my two best friends to go driving around. This was in the late 60s. I don't condone this now, but we were able to get some beers from my friend George's house, and we decided to hang out and drive around in the hills and have some fun. Being as young as we were, it didn't take much of the beer to get us way too intoxicated that we absolutely shouldn't have been anywhere near a car. Drinking was the one thing that my dad definitely would have gotten pissed at me for doing, so we drove way out and found a spot on the side of the road. It was a relatively safe area, pretty late at night, that we wouldn't have any problem being alone at. It was hard to tell how long that we were hanging out there. I mean, we were young and obviously all lightweights, so we weren't drinking way too much. But we did get rather pretty drunk and lost track of what was going on. No one thought about it much because even though we were all guys and our fathers wouldn't have cared that we were out late at night, they always seemed happy if we were doing the things that they had also done when they were our age. After a while, though, we realized that we had better head back to civilization. We all agreed to go to George's house because his dad would not have cared that we were drinking. The other two guys wanted to drive, but I wouldn't let them. It was my car, and I didn't want anyone else driving it. However, in retrospect, I may have wished that they had. I was impaired enough that it was difficult to realize where we were going, and being out there in the hills on those country roads made it difficult to really know where we were going, to begin with. Everything looked exactly the same. We had made some turns that we hadn't made before, and I had a really hard time trying to find them. The roads up in those hills were very winding and confusing at times, so it was really easy to get lost if you weren't paying attention, and we ended up getting very lost. A bit of time after we had gotten lost, the other guys kept on insisting that I let them drive. They insisted that I'd gotten them lost because I was drunker than them and that either of them would be able to get us to George's house. But I wasn't about to let anyone else drive my car yet, so I kept ignoring them, insistent that I was only momentarily lost. At one point, as I was driving uphill, I suddenly saw something in front of the car. There was a very strange-looking man standing right in the middle of the road, and he was holding his hands up as if he wanted us to stop the car. He looked like some psycho who escaped from a hospital for the criminally insane. My buddy Phil, who was riding shotgun, yelled at me to hit the brakes. Of course, I was intoxicated, so that was quicker said than done. I wasn't able to hit the brakes before the car rammed right through the man in the road. But there was no impact. We didn't know if we had hit the guy or if he had jumped out of the way, but it seemed like we had missed him. None of us were brave enough to get out and check, though, unfortunately. If you had seen the guy, you would understand why. Any urban legend you have ever heard where you have seen a grotesque killer described, picture him. And that was this guy. We did the only thing a bunch of scared 14-year-old boys could do. We drove away as fast as we could. The experience sobered me up quite a bit, so I was able to drive away and eventually find our way back to familiar territory. Once we did that, we got to George's house to sleep it off. We have no idea what happened that night. Just that we all saw it happen. George thought it was a ghost, and Phil thought it was a lunatic, but we never encountered him again, nor was there any damage to the car, so we hadn't hit him. Hey y'all, Killer Orange Cat here. So far I want to thank everybody who has joined the Patreon. We have 5 members so far. We have 4 free members and 1 paid member. I'm going to read everyone's name out for this first video, but in the future it's one of the perks of being the paid members that I will be reading their name at the end of every video. So, thank you Evil Black Cat, DJ Lira, Linda Moore, Bonnie Gibbs, and Heidi H. Heidi H is our paid member. Thank all of you for joining up. It's going to be a process growing this, but I'm really happy with everything that has gone on so far. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please give it a like, leave a comment to let me know what you think of it, and share it with someone you think might enjoy it. If you have an original story you'd like narrated on Killer Orange Cat, please go ahead and send it to the address in the description. Also, our Discord server and the Patreon address are included in the description. Also, subscribe and hit the bell if you haven't done this already, so you'll get notified of new content. But in the meantime, please don't forget to make sure to check in your closet and check under your bed, because you never know where a Killer Orange Cat might be hiding. Good night.